Let's make some tabletop wargaming terrain with corrugated cardboard. To start, we need to cut these boxes down to our 1-inch thick base sheets. We have our stack of cardboard. Next step, glue the pieces together into a just shy of 1-inch thick stack, all more or less the same size. It doesn't take much, just a bead to hold everything together during initial assembly. Now that we have our stack, we just let it dry for a little while. Using our triangle and a pencil or pen, we're going to start measuring out 2-inch sized hexes on our board while it dries. The straightness of the lines is not paramount, it's just really more of a guideline. What is important is the lines be spaced about 1 inch apart to produce hexagons that are 2 inches from flat edge to flat edge. Once the first set of parallel lines is drawn, draw 2 more sets rotated 60 degrees to each other. You should get a nice array of equilateral triangles over which you can trace your hexagons. If you did it right, you should have a nice rough hex grid to work with. We're going to recreate the hill from the original Battletech map sheet. And start tracing out the general shape of our terrain piece. So again, it doesn't have to be exact, it just has to be good enough. We'll start over here at the edge, and we see that we have 2 level 1s. Sketch out. We want to cut roughly these 2 level 1s and go up to a level 2. Now the level 2 is going to sit on top of the level 1, so we include it in the sketch of the level 1. And when it comes down to the next hex, we do want it big enough to be able to support a miniature standing on it. So do keep that in mind. This does have to support a miniature. And it's okay if it goes a little over a hex line. That's okay. The original maps weren't incredibly precise with some of their shapes either. And the level 2, well, we just kind of make that take up the middle of the adjacent hex, and we're going to cut that out of that and put it on top of the level 1. As long as it takes up most of the hex, it should be okay. And up above that tree line, we see we have kind of a wrenchy shape, and it's all level 2, so we're going to make it level 1. We're going to start over on the other side of our sheet, because it's going to be a strange shape. So it's going to come up, it's going to start down there. It kind of comes over, takes up most of the hex, and it comes over, takes up most of the hex over here again. And it jogs over. We're jogging up to this hex up here. It comes back down, over into this adjacent hex, goes back up and around. Now, we need to be able to do that twice. But for the second time, we don't need this hex up here. What we do is we look to see, is there 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes that are adjacent to each other that don't interfere, and we do in fact see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 right here that do exactly that. So we can just sketch out right there. And it doesn't have to exactly match the shape we're going to stack it on top of, just close enough. Our basic shapes for this lower quadrant of the map's hills to be cut out. Now that we have our shapes outlined, very carefully, if your tools ended up being a little bit duller than you anticipated, like I did, don't worry about it. Don't worry about any little frassy-frass bits. We're going to fix that in the next step. I've done this before, and in hindsight, since my tools are so blunt, this may have been better done cutting out the individual layers first, then gluing them together instead of gluing them all together and cutting them out afterward. Maybe the next time we can do it the other way and see if that works out any better. We now have two serviceable pieces, identical in shape to the original introductory Battletech map. And if you're satisfied with these, they will work. With Alpha Strike, Battletech classic terrain rules, they are about the right size. But we can do better. With a little plaster of Paris and some old newspaper, we're going to gussy these up with some plaster paper mache. First, we soak the newsprint in some water, get it nice and mushy, get those fibers just absolutely soaked, and just shredded and torn apart. It's going to give a plaster a little more texture. They're going to pill up, they're going to bunch, it's going to look like rocks and outcroppings. It's going to look great. We're going to use some of our extra cardboard as a staging area so we don't just absolutely wreck our working table here. We take some of our paper mush here. We just add it to our plaster of Paris and just work that all together into a nice paste. Get it really slathered on here. Don't be shy, just slather it on. The extra layer that the paper mache and the plaster of Paris is going to add into it, well, that'll get us up to our 1 and 2 inch measures that we were going for. Make sure you completely cover all the corrugated cardboard, or else you're going to have openings where moisture or pests can get in, make nests, and ruin your terrain at a later date. Multiple applications, layer it up, will give you better results than trying to get everything covered in one go. The primary name of the game is patience. Next step is to just let it dry. Then we prime it, paint it, flock it. Let's see how it looks. While these were drying, I had an unfortunate realization. And if you've been playing Battletech as long as I have, you probably already know what it was. This little forest area in here, I wasn't really paying attention. That's not level 1 or level 0 ground. That forest is all level 3, which means it's supposed to be in between these two pieces, jutting up the full 3 inches. Not to worry though, we have lots of cardboard left over still. So we're just going to take these two pieces, cut them free from the cardboard base that they got plastered to, and fit some new pieces in between them to build it up and make that little 3 in between them. They just peeled right off. We see the flat portion of this piece is up against this indentation over here. That would correspond to here and this. There we go. What we're going to do, we're going to cut out some 3 hex clusters and just build them up to 3 inches high, plaster them into place. And here, across. There's the outline we're going to work with. just like that. And now, let's get some new cardboard to put this on top of and get plastering. The big trick with plastering is not to mix more plaster than you can apply in a single go. Just you figure it out as you go along. When you're just first getting started, you're going to waste quite a bit of plaster. And that's okay. It's all part of the learning experience. We're going to start off by just kind of putting on some connection areas between our existing two structures and the new structure. Get the connecting material in there real good. You want a nice, strong bond formed. We want the plaster to be a nice, thick paste, not so much the consistency of milk that you would normally have when working with plaster. It does mean it's going to set faster. It also means it's easier to work with. Really get that in there. One thing that's important not to worry about is little imperfections here and there. That's what makes the piece. As long as it's not a big gaping hole, you are golden. You'd never know that we had to fix a mistake. It's looking good. We're going to let this cure for a little longer and get to priming. For the ink wash, we're going to be taking some lighter colored paints to do a dry brush. And I just picked out some sandstone colored pigments and an old makeup brush, actually donated by my wife. Anything that's soft, it's not going to knock off the top layers of paint or plaster. The important thing is that it's soft. So just using some really cheap craft paints. Put a small dab of the darkest color of them first. Just a small dab. Doesn't take much. We're going to take our makeup brush and we're going to just really smear it on there. And then just kind of wipe it off onto our terrain piece. Add in some color. Really all directions. Just kind of really bring out the depth of the piece. Don't worry about going overboard for this first layer. If you feel it's too much, you can always give it another wash. Our goal is to bring out the highlights in layers. So the lowest layer, base layer, is probably not going to be very visible at the end product, but it gives us a nice base coat to work with. Then the ink wash that we just gave it kind of gives our crevices a nice dark, deep appearance, than more so than they really are. It kind of really just gives those dark crevices a nice deep highlight. And gives everything a nice dark base coat. Too much will fill in some of the crevices that we've just ink washed. But again, if you do too much in one go, you can always add a second ink wash. It's not going to hurt anything. Just be very light and gentle. And feel free to lift the piece too. Really get in there. Once that first coat has a nice solid going, we go on to the next lightest color. Now, 2 tones is probably fine for most instances. We're going to go ahead and do 3 different lighter colors and really give it a nice rocky look, hopefully. This layer is going to be just a touch lighter. Just kind of give it a little extra depth there. And we're going to not quite give it as much coverage with this second color so that it really kind of stands out from the first color. And finally, our lightest color, we want to barely apply any of that. Just the lightest of dustings of the final lightest color. give it that nice weathered look. We're still not quite done yet. We still need trees. And there we have it. A very nicely flocked terrain piece based on the original Battletech map. Of course, you're free to add additional flock to taste as you see fit. Trees, once the glue dries and locks them in place, they are pretty solidly in place. And there's enough space to accommodate the 3 mechs the original map was designed for. And there we go. One cardboard piece of terrain, painted and flocked, ready for play. Well, I hope you enjoyed following the process. Hopefully it was informative. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to leave them below. I don't read everything immediately, but I might get around to it eventually. Thanks for watching.